Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Cash Flow Positive. Today, I am bringing in the MTR expert in the space. The last episode, I talked about why you should STR, but this is an STR versus MTR week. And so we got to bring in one of the best, Vivian Yip. So Vivian is from Austin, Texas. She has a property management company where they manage over 30 MTRs. And so she owns and manages a listing site called Crew Homes specifically for MTRs. We're going to really dive into why MTRs are great investments, where you should MTR, why location matters, how to legally protect yourselves, how to find potential tenants, and even how to find the data to analyze and evaluate midterm rentals. So Vivian, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Tell us more about yourself.
Hey, Kenny, thanks for having me on here. I think let's just start with the elephant in the room. I'm bald. I for those of you who are joining,
That's a great way to start. I love it. Oh, goodness.
so if you're wondering, I am completely bald. I lost all my hair in 2020, 2021, and I'm completely healthy. So please don't think that I'm sick. I'm completely healthy, and I lost my hair to alopecia.
You look great. And in fact, like it would have obviously never been brought up, but you really do look great.
Well, thank you. I losing my hair very suddenly was a difficult time, but the moment I shaved off my head, my hair shaved off, my husband shaved off my hair. And the moment I looked in the mirror, I was like, oh, damn, I have a nice head. So why not rock it?
There you go. I love it. I love it. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so what else?
So I wanted to start with that because it really leads into who I am now as a person and how my journey came to be. I've been investing in real estate since 2004, long, long time ago. But because back then we didn't have communities, we didn't have podcasts, we didn't have YouTube channels, didn't have Facebook groups, right? Back then, I didn't have the community to help me support my real estate investing journey. So I never really thrived. However, by 2017, 2018, I'm working at Apple. I'm looking at my life. Oh my God, is this what the rest of my life looks like? Going to corporate, taking care of the kids, bathing them, putting to bed. And I was like, you know what? I want to do something different. And that's when I rediscovered the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book again, when I met someone at an airport who was telling me that he owned a bunch of hotels and he goes on vacation all the time. And I was like, that's what I want. I want to stop trading time for money. And that became the foundation for real estate investing. And I came home from that trip after meeting that guy at the airport. I said to my husband, I'm like, we need to start doing real estate again, right? If we don't want to be in corporate behind a desk for the rest of our lives, we have to start doing something different. So we started flipping houses. So how hard can it be? So we started flipping houses. Long story short, read another book called Tax Free Wealth. Have you read that one? Amazing book, changed my life. And I realized that I need to start keeping the properties. And that's when I started dabbling in short-term rentals. And then when I lost my hair, I started moving into midterm rentals completely by accident because midterm rentals provided me consistent income, the kind of consistent income I needed to replace my six-figure income at Apple. And that's kind of my story, my 6-year journey. I've gone crazy learning everything I need to about midterm rentals, basically making sure that it's not another job for me, which I know for some people in short-term rentals can feel like another job, but I've learned how to automate and systematize so that I'm only spending like 10% of my time in it.
Gotcha. That is really, really cool. That's a good background. I really appreciate you sharing all that. So you live in around Austin, Texas. So traditionally, from what we've personally, I'm speak from my perspective. I've always seen, and even TV shows too, I guess on Netflix, like we always see Austin, Texas as this perfect short-term rental market. So what got you to like switch? Like what was that moment where you found midterm rentals or became interested in it? in a market? Or, I mean, I don't know. I assume you started this in Austin, Texas. But what got you there?
It was a total accident. So you're right. Austin market is a really good short-term rental market, but things are changing, right? Patterns are changing, permits are changing, travel behaviors are changing, things like that. But I did start my first short-term rental in Round Rock, Texas, which is just over the border from North Austin. And the reason why I switched was because of the pandemic. I don't know how many of your listeners have been hosting pre-pandemic. I'm sure you have been, right? Do
Yeah.
you remember what Airbnb was doing? What
Yeah.
were they doing? They were canceling reservations, right? If
And full
someone
refund, full
full
refund, no
refund,
questions
canceling
asked.
reservations,
Yep.
even if you had a strict cancellation policy, they would be like, "Oh yeah, you don't your quinceanera got canceled or your graduation got canceled, no problem, we'll just refund you." That left hosts high and dry, and hosts all over the nation, all over the country was like, "Okay, what do I do next?" I was one of them. And I said, I'm going to try doing a 30-day stay model. I've already furnished the house. I've already spent all the money to do that. I've already, put together my digital manual and I know how to run a short term. Let's just try the midterm rental strategy. And at the time, we didn't even know it was called midterm rental. It was just a 30-day stay. So I published it on Furnish Finder. I published it on the MLS. Next thing you know, I had a family from California that was building a house. They stayed for 3 months. They were paying 2 times more than long-term rent. To me, that was great. And they stayed for 3 months. After they left, I got a construction crew that stayed with me for 7 months. And they paid me a little bit over 2 times rent for long-term rental. And I only had to refill their toilet paper once. I only had to refill their toilet. Actually, I didn't have to refill. I gave them their starter supply of toilet paper, paper towels, things like that. And the rest was up to them. And I was like, wow, this is great because now I'm not handling turnovers. I'm not handling consumable costs. It was so easy and it was consistent. Whereas before with short-term rentals, my weekends would be booked, my weekdays would be empty. I don't know when my next reservation was going to come in. I really liked having a long view of of how long my tenant was going to stay. So when I saw that succeeding, this model, and my hair was coming out like crazy. I was super stressed out. And I was looking at quitting my job. And I was like, well, if this can provide me consistent income and I could do it with one property, why can't I do it with more properties in Austin? And I was beginning to not like that property that I had a short term rental in because the neighborhood wasn't that great, but the market was really hot. So I was like, let's just unload this property, take the funds and the distributions, and let's reinvest it in more properties. So that's exactly what we did. So while I was quitting my job, while my hair was falling out, I was super stressed. I took a leave of absence at Apple and I hyper focused on finding distressed properties that I could turn around and make them into medium term rentals.
Gotcha. So it sounds like the consistency of it was what drew you, like kind of drew you in to really going all in on midterm rentals. Does that sound correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people that are doing short term rentals don't do it full time. So it doesn't matter to them if they're having consistent income. But for me, because I'm putting food on the table, I'm the breadwinner at home, I wanted to make sure that I had something that I could rely on, not only to pay the mortgage on that property, but also to give me extra money to pay for my lifestyle that I was about to give up with my paycheck.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One thing I think that's really interesting that you pointed out in your story there was that the property you offloaded it maybe wasn't the best area, but with midterm rentals, where you put your midterm rental compared to where you would put a short-term rental, because you've done both, like have you seen like it's better to do short-term rentals in certain areas versus other areas for midterm rentals, or does that even matter?
So I think with midterm rentals, your investing philosophy needs to be like a long-term rental. For me, it's really important. Like I'm going to be fully honest here. I'm not the kind of STR host or vacation rental host that buys in vacation rental markets. I'm not that kind of person. I see real estate as a very conservative asset that is supposed to bring you wealth over long periods of time. So how do you do that? You start with a very conservative investment that follows all the location rules. So for me, I picked a property that was in an high urban density, close to hospitals, close to major employers, close to highways, and close, most importantly, close to good schools. So my investing strategy is all about long-term wealth. And how do you do that? You buy good assets right from the get-go. And they can have multiple exit strategies, whether it's long-term, short-term, midterm. I could even condo these duplexes that I bought.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, I think it's important to choose like midterm rentals. The higher density, more closer to major employers is better because you're going to have way more client avatars that will choose your property.
Yeah. No, I really like that. So buying a good asset, can you define that a little better? I know you said, so I want to highlight, you did mention it could be long-term rented, mid-term rented, potentially short-term rented as well. But what else, is there anything else that entails is like, what makes a good asset to you?
As an investor that's seen through the storm since 2004, a good asset to me is, for me, I don't like condos. I will never invest in a condo again. But I do believe highly in good school districts. Like, so when we buy something, we always say, like, if it can't be solved with money, don't buy it. Right? What does that mean? Don't buy a property that has like shitty neighbors on the side. Can I say shitty on this podcast?
Sure.
Don't buy a property that has like crappy neighbors. Don't buy properties that are next to major highways. Like you don't want road noise, you don't want electrical wires, you don't want to be next to a landfill, you don't want to be in a bad school district. Okay? That is a bad investment. A good investment to me is something that's average size for the neighborhood, maybe a little bit larger. Um, Maybe a 4 bedroom. If there's lots of 3 bedrooms, you want to be something that's different. And I always the whole school district thing and the whole schools that it's zoned to is so important because coming out of 2008 through 2014, I saw how hard properties in bad school zones dropped and how hard it came was that for them to come back up again. So people are always looking for good schools. So like even if a renter, if their lease ends with their landlord, they're going to still try and stay in the same school district because they don't want their kids to change schools. So they will pay more money to stay in that neighborhood. So like, yeah, that's a good asset. A good asset is purchasing something that is fills all the buckets for location, location, location. It's so cliche, but it's so true.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's becoming, even from the short-term rental perspective, more and more important today as we see more and more competition. I find it, there's certain markets, it's really interesting where, especially markets where it's like, it's blatant, like waterfront versus non-waterfront. You look at the waterfront properties, you know, they'll have maybe kayaks or whatever, canoes, just something really basic. Like they don't have that many amenities because they're waterfront. That's why people are going to that market versus all the properties that are like tier 2 or tier 3. They're loaded down with amenities. People are putting in pickleball courts and all these like crazy things and spending a lot of money on them because they're trying to like make up for that location. Whereas like if you have the location, that's not a concern, And so there, obviously there's trade-offs with price and things, but that location, I think that applies to almost any asset class in real estate. So even though it's very cliche.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that the Smokies, for instance, is a great vacation rental spot, but travel patterns have changed. People are going to Japan because of the yen. People are going to Europe because it's more interesting. And people have stopped going to the Smokies, and now the Smokies are struggling. Well, what do? You don't really have you can't MTR because that's not an MTR market. I've had that conversation several times over. You aren't really looking at school, like you're stuck with an asset that's in the middle of nowhere. What do you do next if demand drops? So for me as a conservative investor, I'm thinking high urban density, good schools, good employers, that will pretty much always sell. If I need to exit, I can exit.
That's a really good point. I like that. You've kind of got the exit strategy, the exit in the back of your mind as you make every single purchase.
Every single purchase.
You mentioned markets. Let's talk about that. So most of our audience here, as I kind of mentioned, very heavily involved in short-term rentals. At least I hope, because that's all pretty much I talk about. So when one starts to think about midterm rentals, the first thing that comes to my mind, midterm rentals, I think urban markets, because you can, that's the regulations for the most part support midterm rentals and long-term rentals. But are there ideal markets or types of markets, I should say, that fit well for midterm rentals?
I think everybody that coaches in the space will agree that just being close to major employers is really important. Being close to major hospitals is really important. And I don't want to say that we're attracting travel nurses because my properties are too expensive for travel nurses. Everyone thinks like, oh, midterm rentals, are you hosting travel nurses? Absolutely not. We're doing something completely different. We're like, when I think about the people that I host, right, we have almost 30 properties in our property management portfolio. They're either coming in for a job, they're coming in because they're relocating, they're coming in because they're remodeling their house, or they're coming in because they've been displaced by insurance, right? Their own home had a water damage issue, or it had mold, or had fire, and they need somewhere to stay. So, having those four avatars that I'm trying to attract, I would not try to have a midterm rental out in the country because that person is looking to be close to work. They're looking to be close to the house they're remodeling. So, urban density, high urban density. That way, you have lots of different avatars you can reach out to. People don't want to drive. They hear about the horrific traffic in Austin, which really isn't that bad because, I came from Chicago, I came from Toronto, but they want to be close to their work. So you want to be in the city
Yeah.
or close to major employers.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. Okay. That's really good. So close, it could be close to the city, but pretty much near major employers is the key thing. And is there like do you have like a rule of thumb for like proximity or distance or whatever from major employers?
I think typically 20 minutes or less is really good because 20 minutes can turn into 40 minutes during traffic. So no traffic, 20 minutes, I think is really good. People don't want to spend all their time on the road.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
And if you're trying to attract travel nurses, maybe you have a studio, maybe you have one bedroom. Travel nurses, a lot of them are working night shifts, so they don't want to be driving 30, 40 minutes, in the middle of the night or after a long shift, first thing in the morning, or coming home to somewhere really far away. So they like to be 15 minutes within the hospital.
Gotcha. Okay. Awesome. So you manage a ton of MTRs, over 30, you said. How has that been different than trying to manage a short-term rental?
There's a couple of things. And you'll see this in Airbnbs, like what to know if you're hosting extended stays is that you need to have a lease agreement.
Okay.
And this is important no matter what market you're in, because the moment you hit 28, 29, or 30 days or 31 days, depending on what your county or city says, you move from a short term rental guest into a midterm rental guest. And I would say that I was sort of a pioneer in the space because I started hosting extended stays 6 years ago, and there weren't really people paying attention to that because a lot of people were so hot on short-term rentals as they should have been because it was really hot. Um, but you want to make sure that you understand that risk. However, I talked to an eviction attorney. I consulted an eviction attorney before I started hosting these stays. Like, what are my risks? What do I need to do? What do I need to have in my lease agreement? And this eviction attorney said, Vivian, the moment you let someone in the door, doesn't matter if it's a short-term rental or midterm rental, the moment you let someone in the door, the eviction process is the same. And I was
Mm,
like, okay, that's kind of true because I mean, look what happens in LA or in California. They open the door, they get in, they decide to squat and they stay, right? So like as soon as they have access to your property, there's that risk. So I was like, okay, then that was a false belief that I had. So then I started overcoming the false belief by curating a specific lease agreement with this eviction attorney that would make sure that if someone's signing this agreement with me, that they're signing that they are only staying in my property for transient purposes only, and that there's no intention for them to establish residency in my property. And by doing that, by having those terms in my lease, I can now have them escorted off the property based on criminal eviction versus versus a civil case, which is for them to establish tenancy.
Mm. So so it's just the agreement, they sign that agreement, therefore, they are now considered transient rather than like a full-time tenant or something, or like how does that?
It's establishing their intention for their stay, right? They sign that agreement at the like before they move into the property. It's establishing their intention for the use of my property, and if they overstay, then I actually had to do this before to call the police, and they said, "Well, this is a civil issue," and I said, "Well, they actually signed this agreement that told me that they had no intention of staying more than 30 days. They had no intention of establishing tenancy." And they're like, "Oh, okay, well, then we can come in and escort them off the property for criminal trespassing."
Yeah, that's wow, that's pretty. Now, is there what if it's a midterm rental? What if they're in there for 4 months? Does that change the terms, or it can still be the same thing where you say, hey, you're here for 4 months and that's it? Anything beyond that, this
For
is
me, it's the same
transient.
thing.
Okay,
For me,
so
it's
that
the
doesn't
same thing.
matter.
Like your intention for moving in is not to establish residency. Is that you needed your place, you need my place because your place wasn't available or you're relocating, right? So we typically don't host those like those 4, 5, 6 month stays unless they have been displaced from their own home. I mean, we have project teams that might stay that long, but for the most part, it's people that have been displaced by insurance that they'll stay for 4 to 6 months. Do they have a home to go back to?
Yeah, no, that's really really interesting. Um, I mean, short-term rental hosts aren't doing that. That's not in their rental agreements. So it
Most
makes it,
short-term rental hosts aren't even doing rental agreements, which blows my mind.
yep. So yeah, there's a lot of liabilities that short-term rental hosts expose themselves to by doing short-term rental versus mid or long-term, because a lot of them aren't doing leases. They're relying on the platforms. So that's very interesting. Okay.
Which is scary because the platform's not going to release the names if something happens.
Right.
Like
Yep.
I know I get a selfie, I get a ID, I get AI tools to screen my guests. Every single one that walks in the door, I have a profile of who they are.
That's one thing that I think we all have to do a better job of, making sure that we have that protection and speak to an attorney and have, a lease agreement, and just making sure that, that's all outlined, especially from a safety side too. Okay. Midterm rentals. One of the biggest questions and hesitancies I see with people trying to get into midterm rentals. It's a magic question beyond like, oh, how do I get started? Or simply the location. How do you find people to come and stay at your place and get that consistency like you're looking for?
There's a low-hanging fruit that everybody's not paying attention to. That low-hanging fruit is Airbnb. Okay.
Yeah.
So even for my business, about 50% of the business comes from Airbnb. What people don't know is that 20 to 30, sorry, 20 to 25% of nights booked on Airbnb are for 30 night stays and more. That's a huge chunk of their business.
Wow. Yeah.
If you learn to position your business, your Airbnb, your furnished rental properly on Airbnb, you learn to position it correctly, then the reservations come. And if you've automated like I have, then you just let the reservations fly, and then you can focus on building the relationships with the insurance companies, with local corporations, with corporate housing companies, and things like that. Otherwise, you might be beating your head against the wall trying to get a travel nurse into your 4 bedroom house, and travel nurses aren't looking for 4 bedroom houses. So you have to like the low hanging fruit is learning how to position on Airbnb and then spending time to go position yourself in other places like
Okay.
Zillow, like apartments.com. Some people use Furnish Finder, but Furnish Finder is, you have to remember their website was developed to attract travel professionals, and those travel professionals typically are traveling as singles and they want studios and 1 bedrooms, sometimes 2 bedrooms. But once you get the 3 and 4 bedrooms, it might not be a useful site for you because their demand drops for those sizes.
And that's kind of let me follow up with that, because this question popped up in my head and you kind of touched on it earlier. most people assume midterm rentals, traveling nurses, corporate housing, like individuals, but it's so much more than that. So in your experience, have you found, like you were kind of mentioning, like 4 bedroom, like is there like a sweet spot for you where you're like, this is kind of the ideal, bedroom or square footage or whatever bedroom count, excuse me, for a midterm rental?
That is a question you need to dive into the details for because like we have in my property management company, we have studios all the way to 5 bedrooms. Our 5 bedroom in an HOA, 30-day minimum HOA, has been booked constantly for like the last year and a half. And we have some 4 bedrooms that don't do as well. It just depends on, not that it doesn't do as well, it's just not as well as the 5 bedroom. You have to look at the data in your market. So I always say this: go to Price Labs and build a comp set, for instance, and see how many short-term rentals are 3 bedrooms, how many short-term rentals are 4 bedrooms, and how many are 5 bedrooms. In my market, it's almost all 3 bedrooms on Airbnb. But what happens if some of those start converting to midterm rentals? Then there's going to be a saturation of 3 bedrooms in midterm rentals in my market. So I try to go and do something different. I try to do 4 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms at that point. So it's a very hyper local data set that you need to look at. Because I really truly believe more and more people are going to slide from the short term rental space into the midterm rental space. And you don't want to be caught in saturation. If you have the opportunity to acquire a new property, then get something that's different than what's already out there.
Yep, that's really helpful. I'll share just a quick story. So I was hosting in Buffalo, New York, and Buffalo passed some stupid rules in for short-term rentals where it couldn't be owner occupied, or sorry, non-owner occupied, unless it met certain criteria. It couldn't be in any houses that had more that were bigger than a duplex, so like triplexes or more, which is really dumb. But basically, they were trying to eliminate apartment buildings where you could STR in. But it wiped out a ton of the supply for short-term rentals. And so you had all these people who were doing rental arbitrage or leasing, apartments as short-term rentals, and or even some houses that didn't qualify. And now they're like, "Crap, what do we do?" And they go to midterm rental because that's the next thing. And they just saturate the market. The supply of midterm rentals went from like, I don't know, maybe like 200 to like 700 in a week because Buffalo just laid down the hammer, sent notices out to everybody, and was like, "You better stop, or you're going to get it's like $1,000 a day fine or whatever, and so it was this big boom, which made prices for midterm rentals drop down to where it didn't make a lot of sense to even midterm rent if you didn't have something already established. And so I think that saturation point, like you're saying, is really, really, really important. So you look at the number of properties. What other data points are you also trying to target too, and for midterm rentals?
So if I'm evaluating a specific property, I will run a comp set and just check who in my surrounding area is running the same size property. Then I dive even deeper to make sure that they're a competitive host to me, right? Comparable. Someone that's going to be a super host that has great reviews. Then I make sure we have the same amenities, whether there's a hot tub or pool, which my properties don't, because midterm rental guests don't typically need that. But then I look at their calendar. So I'll go into every specific listing and see if they know how to manage their calendar as a midterm rental. If they don't, like if they're taking reservations far into the future, I know they have zero clue what a midterm rental is, or they have zero clue how to control their calendar. So that puts me in a better competitive advantage because I know midterm rentals, the lead times are so short. They're usually 3 days and less. And if I can manage and learn how to capture, like be comfortable with an open calendar and take in short-term reservations in between while I wait for the midterm rental contract, then I know how to position and capture those opportunities.
So you're actually doing a hybrid.
Yes.
Tell us more about that.
So hybrids are probably the strongest way to run a midterm rental because then you can start emphasizing midterm rentals first and then filling the gaps with short-term stays. People get confused with this a lot. So number one, you have to understand what your market lead time is. And you can go to your Airbnb listings and look at the insights to see what your average lead time is. This morning I checked, we're like 5.9 days across all of our properties.
Wow.
That's crazy, right?
That's so short.
That's so short, right?
Yeah.
People know that there's 14,000 Airbnbs in Austin to choose from, so they're not in a rush to go and book something. They just go last minute and see who's got the best deals. Okay. So, but the thing is, like, if you know what your lead time is and you set your minimum stays, so like today, for the next 7 days, I'll allow one night stays. And when you do that, you go to the top of the algorithm, correct? Because when you make money, when you're bookable, Airbnb is bookable and they make money. So they prioritize your listing. So between now and the next 7 days, I will choose to do one night or even 2 night minimums, depending on your comfort level. And then after 7 nights, I might say that you can only stay with me a minimum 30 days. The idea behind midterm rentals is to prevent those future bookings from clogging up your calendar and taking your opportunity away for hosting these long guests. Like I've been working with Airbnb and furnish hosts for years. And this is the same problem I see over and over again because I get a lot of leads for insurance days. And then I'll contact a property in Dallas or an owner in California. And I'll say, hey, I have this 8 month opportunity at $10,000 a month. Do you want it? And they'll say, well, I've got one reservation in August. I've got one reservation in September. I don't want to cancel it because I don't want to lose my superhost status. But yet they're afraid to run their model the way I do because they like seeing these reservations in the future. But that's actually holding them back from getting those long, profitable reservations.
They're focused on occupancy, not revenue.
Right. Whereas I'm focused on both.
Yep. I think that's a really good, really good point. Okay. There's lots to dive in on that. So how does that correlate to your pricing strategy though?
So I think I made this mistake when I first started was I don't know if it's because I was lazy or I was ignorant, but I would just be like, oh, I just want $3,500 a month or $4,000 a month, whatever is 2x of long-term rent, right? I kind of set that as my pricing, and that's what I would quote. But really, if you're going to run a short-term rental, midterm rental model, I think it's really important to use dynamic pricing. Because if you don't use dynamic pricing, you're not capturing the ups and you're not focusing on the downs either. Like if you think about someone that's staying in a midterm rental, if their other option is a hotel and they need to stay for Christmas or New Year's or spring break, that hotel, I can guarantee you, is making that upside. You as a host should also be making that upside. So you should be dynamically pricing your properties but of course there's no rule like how do you discount it for a 30-night stay. You have to look at your market specifically, look at your competition and see how they're pricing on a 30-day stay. But I would say like usually between 18 to 25% discount off a STR rate is reasonable, but you have to really dive into a comp set to see where you should be at. But I do believe in dynamic pricing.
Are you in any markets where there can be no STRs, like your properties can only be MTRs? And does that change your approach?
Yeah, we have it doesn't change our approach. Well, yeah, it doesn't really change our approach. We have a couple of properties that we manage that are 30-day minimum due to the HOA.
Okay.
But if we get a summer reservation in July, that's when we're using the most electricity. If we're gonna charge a little bit more than in the winter time.
So are you still seeing those lead times pretty low as well for those types of properties with 30-day minimums?
Yep.
Wow.
We get so many reservations a day or two in advance, but they'll stay for like 4 months, 6 months, 8 months.
Wow.
It's really knowing how to open your calendar to attract those stays and preventing those tiny stays in between.
That's really awesome. Thank you for sharing all this. This is blowing my mind here. So at least you can say you blew one person's mind from this podcast. So who are booking these last minute stays at these types of properties?
Okay, so like I said, it's people that are coming in teams, people that are relocating for work, or people that have are remodeling, right? So if you think about the person that just got a new job and they're relocating to the city, what does that interview process look like? You show up at an interview, the next day you get the job offer, and then 2 weeks later you're expected at your desk. So lead time 2 weeks, right? Reasonable. Same thing with a nurse. Their lead time for booking is usually between 13 and 29 days, right? That's furnish finder data. So that's a longer lead time. They have more forecasts as to where that nurse is going next. Nobody plans to burn their house down. Nobody plans to flood their home when like I'll tell you, one of my clients, they went to India, right? They flew to India and they got one of those notifications from the city of Austin that said you have an unusual usage of water in your home. So they sent their neighbor. What happened? Their shower rod came crashing down while they were away, hit the bidet, and the bidet flooded their bathroom.
Oh my gosh, that's
Okay.
crazy.
So like nobody plans for that to happen. So the lead time for insurance housing is also very short. It's the people and then people that are chasing hailstorms, right? You get crews that come and chase hailstorms to do roofing jobs or paintless dent repair. They're chasing the storm, so they don't know. Like they're not planning 2 weeks in advance to go and chase a hailstorm. They know that the hailstorm happens, and then they send their crews out the next day. So the people that are staying these extended stays, their lead time, their planning is very short because of the nature of that client avatar.
That's really interesting. Okay. Well, first off, what amenities are required for a midterm rental versus, like what I guess what do you need in a midterm rental and what do you not need in a midterm rental compared to short-term rental?
You don't, let's start with what you don't need. You don't need fancy murals. You don't need grass walls. You don't need neon lights that say slay.
Sleigh or
Slay.
game
Um,
room or
yeah, you don't need the foosball tables. None of that stuff matters. So when people are booking a midterm rental, they just want a comfortable, clean home. So what that means is that don't buy those cheap Amazon couches or Wayfair couches that are like cardboard boxes enveloped in velvet, right? Buy something that's really good quality. Like my favorite way of buying furniture is getting brands like West Elm or Pottery Barn or even Restoration Hardware, but getting them used on Facebook Marketplace, and even better, shopping for them at the end of the month when people are trying to move. That's like a golden ticket for a really good deal because people have to leave wherever they're staying and they'll basically strike a deal with you because how many people have a pickup truck that can go pick up a giant couch or a big desk or a big bed at the end of the month when they're desperate to leave? So that for me is a really a good way to acquire good furniture. And I have a West Elm Urban couch at home, for instance, right? Paid $4,000 brand new for that couch 7 years ago. But till this day, we sit on it every single day. The quality is so good, it still feels like the first day I bought it. So because of that, I'm sold on West Elm furniture, but I don't want to pay West Elm prices, so I buy them
no.
used on Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah.
The other thing is like a really good mattress. So I hate those rollout mattresses that come from a box on Amazon. I like the Helix Lux brand. Helix Lux Midnight is probably my favorite. It's so comfortable. I'm at my lake cabin right now. That's what we sleep on here. My son has one at home. Unbelievable quality, and you could buy those used on Facebook Marketplace for 650 for a brand new, like for gently used or fell off the truck one. And then nightstands. A lot of people don't realize that when you're hosting a midterm stay guest, there's a lot of people that want a nightstand because maybe they sleep with a CPAP machine or maybe they read a book at night, things like that, right? So nightstands on both sides are really important. And then a fully equipped kitchen. We're talking a full set of pots and pans, full sets of plates and dishes and cups. Even better if you can go towards the corporate housing standard. And what I mean by that is having white dishes, white bowls, white plates, everything white and glasses clear, everything matchy matchy. Because when you do it that way, you're really professional host status. Like you walk into a Marriott Residence Inn, you open the cabinets, it's all matchy matchy. That's what corporate housing wants. And a workspace, a dedicated workspace, a desk where someone can set up a desk, pay their bills, do Zoom calls, things like that. The majority of people that are have returned to workforce still have stay from home options. So having a place for them to work is a great amenity to have.
Gotcha. No, that's really good. Just kind of final question here. What advice do you give STR owners who are looking to switch to midterm rental or get into the midterm rental space?
Um, my advice is take a look at what your lead time booking behavior is. If you are not one of those special properties that sleeps 16 to 18 people, if you're just a regular old boring home and your lead times continue to compress, maybe it's time for you to switch to a hybrid model where you can learn how to attract those extended stays and fill your calendars because a lot of people are struggling right now. Their investment property is no longer performing in the way it used to. So look at your lead times and maybe you can learn how to attract those midterm stays. There's a free masterclass on my website, vivianyip.com. Okay. And it goes over that. The second advice is furnish your property to corporate housing standards because when you get the opportunity to host these guests that are coming from insurance or corporate housing, which is really possible if you're booked in the right place, then you're already prepared. And finally, if you want me to help you get these corporate stays, you can put your property on my listing platform, which is free, and that's crewhomes.com, CRUhomes.com. And that's where because we work every day with the insurance relocation companies and we're aggregating that demand. They don't know where their next request is coming from. I don't know when the next request is coming from. But the idea is to fill my database with a huge supply of properties that I can choose from. And that way, when I have a need in Michigan, in Kalamazoo, Michigan, or in Davenport, Idaho, or whatever, that I'm able to find that host and connect that stay.
That's awesome. Okay, cool. You kind of mentioned your website, so vivianyip.com. You've got your other, that's your personal website. And this website, you said crew.com, right? And then
Crew
if
Homes.
Crew Homes, excuse me, crewhomes.com. And then if somebody wants to get in touch with you to learn more about your services, manage a property for them, or just, get, some, I don't know, answer some questions, what's the best way for people to do that?
Yeah, they can visit my Instagram at Vivian Yip _official, and I will be able to talk to you and figure out how we can work together.
Yeah, for sure. And Vivian's, as you guys can tell, she's very personal and super helpful. And so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to her personally at on social media, Instagram at Vivian Yip _official. Well, Vivian, any parting words of advice and experience or anything like that you want to share with us to help our investors? Name of the show is Cash Flow Positive. So help them cash flow positive with MTRs.
My words of advice is that we bought investment properties to make them into cash flow machines. So let's, work together and figure out how to make your property cash flow like crazy without the headaches of short-term rentals and find the beauty in midterm rentals. Like in my free guidebook, I talk about the 15 different avatars that midterm rentals user clients are. And once you land your first midterm rental client, you'll be like, holy smokes, this is so easy. And you're going to love it. And then you're going to be like, I don't want to do short term rentals anymore because I don't want to chase cleaners anymore. I don't want to fill toilet paper anymore. I don't want to do all that anymore. And you're going to love the midterm rental model. On
That's
paper,
awesome.
we earn less. On paper, we earn less. But our net consumables is so much like we spend so much less on cleaning and turnovers, which is what I love. And the consistent money.
Right. Right. Those are all great points. And thank you so much, first off, for being on the show and giving us all this knowledge. It definitely opened my mind to things that I didn't even know about with midterm rentals and how to find and evaluate them. I thought that was really, really helpful. And honestly, you make it sound so easy.
Okay,
so, somebody's good at something is when they're like explaining, you're like, I'm going to do that right now. Like, I can do that. So.
I want to explain something because someone actually said that to me the other day. They're like, you make midterm rentals sound so easy. It's because I've invested 6 years of my life completely trying to master what I do here, right? What I mean by it's easy is that I've figured out the system that will get my lease assigned automatically, my backgrounds checked, my selfies, my IDs using AI technology to screen who I'm hosting, right? That way I open the floodgates and let the bookings come in. I have spent a lot of time diving into learning how to automate things, how to, I mean, I come from a supply chain background. Okay. I worked at Apple in operations for 7 years. So my mindset is about eliminating bottlenecks and smoothing out the obstacles along the way. So that is my background in corporate is always about reducing cycle time. And that's what I've done in my business. I teach other people how to reduce cycle time, how to reduce risk in their business so they can open more doors to opportunities. So when I make it look easy, it's because I have learned how to do that. So I'm like that plumber that can change a toilet in 30 seconds because he spent a lifetime figuring out how to do that. Right. So while other people struggle with it, I've dedicated my entire career and I had to believe in myself and do this because I had to quit a six-figure job when I lost my hair. And that's when I took all my available resources, all my experiences, and put them into this space. And yeah, I make it look easy because I've invested the time to do that.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing everything. And it sounds like if anyone listening to this, if you are seriously considering MTRs, you need to follow or reach out to Vivian. Like, she obviously knows what she's talking about, and she can probably save you some pitfalls and learning hurdles that you might go through with your first MTR. So thank you so much for being on the show, Vivian. And thank you everybody for listening. And I'll see you on the next episode of Cash Flow Positive.
Thanks, Kenny.